What's up, guys? Who needs Meta here with Cadigan.
Woo! Hi, guys.
Doing another retro deck profile for September 2011 format. Today, we're actually going to look at the last event of the format in YCS Atlanta and Marquis Henderson's first place TG stun list. This was the end of the format, so it is kind of side decked and main decked for cards from Order of Chaos and Photon Shockwave, aka Dino Rabbit Injectors, the Wind Up Loop. The ban was actually known at this time, so this was kind of a last hurrah for this deck. We couldn't find any point list even in the top 32. It was heavily dominated by the Wind Up Loop and Dino Rabbit. But this list did end up winning the event. Marquis is not like a well-known player or anything. The dude just kind of happened to take a deck, make a really good meta call. He didn't play Maxi because he literally said he couldn't afford them. And he said he didn't play Valor because skill drain. And there's a lot of decisions you make in this deck. Like, every time I looked at the list, I was like, why is he only doing this? Why is he doing this? And then I was like, skill drain. Skill drain is the answer to all the questions of why the deck is built the way it is. Literally just skill drain. So we'll get into the list here. We have the two TG strikers. This is your Cyber Dragon and your Tuner. This is the kind of the way we synchro summon and reach the extra deck. We do play a lot of fives because we play the 3 copies of Warwolf. It is important to note that this card can trigger on your opponent's turn and on the first turn of the game if you're going second, so you can get a free body in the board if you feel you need to. So you could just kind of special summon this card whenever level 3 or lower special summon. It is important to note that it does activate, so they can chain Maxi to it. And then 3 copies of Rush Rhino. This card just gets bigger when it attacks by 400, so it goes up to 2,000. Beats over those pesky Thunder Kings, beats over your Reborn Tengus and stuff like that. And then these 2 cards can work with Horn of the Phantom Beast, along with our 3 copies of Reborn Tengu. Again, this card doesn't get hurt by skill drain whatsoever, so we can just keep floating. Works with Horn, things like that. So there's a lot of tricks that this deck does to just keep maintaining advantage. 2 copies of Thunder King. It does prevent us from searching at the end phase. All the TG monsters, when they're destroyed, they search another TG monster from the deck, which is really good. It's how you keep your advantage in going in a deck that only plays 15 monsters. Again, Tengu is 3 Tengus. It constantly floats and all the TG guys. That's why when you do have the option to be like, oh, I can make a synchro play, unless you're synchroing with your Tengu, you're essentially eliminating 2 floaters from the board. So you want to make sure that your cards will get you value when you do synchro summon, which we do with the TG monsters. They all draw cards. That's why I like this deck. These cards, they draw cards. And then 2 Barbaros. This card works really well with skill drain, just being a free 3k beater. Again, works with Horn to draw cards. So we just have so many ways to get through our deck to make sure that even with a low monster count, we can still penetrate through things and things like that. So Beast King Barbaros, really good in that regard. You're very rarely, if ever, going to do the Tribute 3. I've never done it.
Also skill drain.
Also, yeah. But most importantly, skill drain. That's it for the monsters. And then on to the spells. If you play Tengu, you typically play Pot of Avarice and just about every deck that plays Tengu, just the ability. If you can trigger this when you have the 3rd one on the board and the 2 in the graveyard, it's just nuts. And then again, the TG monsters, you can go through them pretty quickly because you're constantly adding. So you do want to make sure that you can make this card live pretty quickly. This deck is not special summon heavy at all. So 3 copies of Pot of Duality. Just to make sure we're getting, again, it does conflict with Thunder King, but Thunder King is so incredibly broken and so good in this format that we're just going to kind of stall on it that way. It's a monster it's a high impact monster, and you just want to make sure you have the high impact monsters. Of the big 4 with Dark Hole, Reborn, Heavy, Book, he only played Dark Hole and Monster Reborn. I would probably play Book of Moon in my deck just because of being hit with, actually I have one sitting here, Royal Decree. This card really hurts you in game 2 and 3, so having a defensive option that isn't a trap card is probably really good. This deck does play 18 traps in the main board, and only 1 MST for the last spell. I would personally play 2. I'd also be playing Maxi, but I can kind of understand the idea of 1 MST. You do side the other 2 because you have to hit Decree out of the side. It's just, you can't really win if you don't. Just 1 MST. It makes sense, but I have seen where I want more than 1, but at the same time, your monsters are so resilient to things like a Torrential Tribute or something like that, to where you're going to be able to get value out of them. And then people aren't going to if there's Solemn Warning, the summon of a Rush Rhino or a Warwolf or something, there already in a bad spot anyways. So I can kind of understand that, but the fact that because everything floats, you're kind of impervious to back row, and you can just use this to hit high impact cards, which makes sense. But I personally would probably play 2. And it's another card that we can set that isn't hit by Roll Decree. And then for the many trap cards, like I said, 18, the 3 copies of Skill Drain. Again, because of the meta at the time being with the Wind-Up Loop and Injectors and Dino Rabbit, this is really good. But if you are playing this deck for, I will probably upload my own version of the September 2011 at some point of this. You might want to consider main 2, side the 3rd. It's okay against plants. It's awful against Dark Worlds. It's awful against heroes. So like this card isn't really like super high impact in those matchups, but like again, when you're getting Wind Up Loop, the 3rd copy is just insane. So that is something to consider going forward. This is again because of what he was playing against. 2 copies of TG1 EM1. This is our creature swap that we get to choose both monsters, and it's a trap card, so we could do it during our opponent's turn. So if they're going for a big, synchro play, we could just steal their tuner. Or if they exceed into something or synchro into something big, we can just give them a weenie and then run over the weenie and then search with the weenie. So that's kind of your standard play with this, where you can just do tricks. There are a lot of battle phase shenanigans in this deck. This card, of course, the 3 horns, draws cards. All of our stuff becomes big. It's something that the first time they run into this, they're going to be kind of wary of it, so you can even bluff it after beyond the first time. But the first time, it's not a card that's typically on people's radar. Whenever you do enter battle phase, they're like, oh, I have to worry about Horn of the Phantom Beast. So you can just, do battle phase shenanigans with them, like our damage stat. And I think it's something like Lance when you have Horn of the Phantom Beast. Again, more battle phase stuff, 1 copy of Mirror Force. This wasn't seeing a ton of play, maybe in higher trap decks, but most decks will play what we call the Staple 5, which is the 3 Solemns, 1 Judgment, 2 Warning, Torrential Tribute, and Trap Dust Shoot. It's also important to note that he didn't play Trap Dust Shoot, and I think Trap Dust Shoot is disgusting, but maybe with the slightly not as diverse metagame because of the Magician and Shark and all that shenanigans that people could do. Dust Shoot just wasn't as good with the lower hand sizes and people not holding their cards as much. They typically can go all out earlier in the game, so Trap Dust Shoot has less value, which I can understand. But again, if you're playing in more of a modern or replaying the format without like up through Gen Force, Trap Dust Shoot's really good. And then 2 Deep Prisons to round out the trap lineup for the battle traps. For summon reaction, we have Torrential Tribute. TGs don't care. We can search. Tengu doesn't care. We're gonna float. So because everything floats, TT is really valuable to us. 2 copies of Bottomless. Again, these are the other summon stoppers here. And then 2 copies of Starlight Road. I don't know if I would play 2, if I would go down to 1, but again, because we play like 18 trap cards, this card is typically going to be alive. The ability to set 5 carefree is really important. Again, with the copy of Solemn Judgment, we essentially have 3 cards that we can stop Heavy Storm with. But it's important to note that this card is only good if you have other cards, if you're protecting a skill drain. But because Horn's going to sit up, Skill Drain is going to sit up, you're going to have multiple copies of trap cards sitting on the board at the same time. So that's why Starlight Road is typically more live. Like even if you're just top decking and you draw it, you will have either a Skill Drain sitting up or a Horn sitting up or another trap card that you haven't used. So it is very likely for these to be live. And then only 1 Solemn Warning. I was like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. 1 Solemn Warning was the point. Then you remember that you have to pay life points for Skill Drain. So you're less likely to resolve this as the game goes on because you're going to be at low life, so Warning becomes a dead draw. So it's kind of like, do I want to see Warning early, but then Skill Drain becomes not as good. Again, if you play Modern, you can, like a modern version of 2011, or you're playing not this particular event with the wind-ups and ejectors and stuff, you can cut one of these and play one of these and then side deck this for the matchups that it really is high impact in. But that's just my 2 cents. Like this card against agents is just free wins, almost. I mean, Hyperion is big, but like the fact that you can just flip this on a Venus is just nuts. And then we'll get on to the extra deck here. So for 5s, we can make 5s really easy. So we have the 1 Catastor, and then we have the TG monsters. Librarian, really good against plants. Again, we're not really going to draw for our own synchro summons. We're going to draw for our opponent's synchro summons. One copy of Wonder Magician. This card is a tuner with the Formula Synchron effect where it can synchro during your opponent's turn. And it pops a back row when it's summoned, and when it's destroyed, it draws a card. But again, if they warning it, it doesn't because it has to be on the field. But the idea that you could summon this guy, pop a back row, and then if your opponent tries to get over around it in the next turn, let's say they go Debris Dragon, target Dandelion. When they do the Dandelion, you can trigger the Warwolf in your hand and then special summon and then synchro for Stardust so that if they're trying to Black Rose your board full, like they're okay, I'll just Black Rose all their back row, you can bring out that one, the Wonder Magician with the Warwolf and then make Stardust, and then that's no longer viable. So that's a really good way to like play around the Black Rose play, which is pretty prevalent, of course, earlier in the format. And then one Power Gladiator. This is piercing, but it's mostly because it's a 2300 beat stick that draws a card when it dies. It does piercing, but again, mostly with skill drain. We're going to just be summoning this as our 5. Yeah, Android is bigger at 24, but like I said, this card replaces itself and has a more useful effect when skill drain isn't on the board. For 6s, Brio, and then we played Gaia Knight over Red Dragon again because skill drain. I was like, why is he playing Gaia Knight and not Red Dragon? Skill drain, which is considerably more relevant, having the big beat stick. 7s are really hard to make, but we just played Black Rose and Ancient Fairy Dragon. Again, high defense, and then the staple 7. But like this card is good on your skill drain because it's nice and big, but it is pretty difficult to make. You have to make it with your 5s, so that makes sense, or with these Slide Deck Cyber Dragons, which is fairly common. And then, of course, the 2 Stardust Dragons for the Starlight Road. And then I was wondering by the last date why it was a Red Dragon Archfiend, and then I remembered it's 3K skill drain.
The answer.
It's always skill drain. I was like, why is he playing this card and not like Scrap Dragons? Like, because this card is skill drain. I personally like Colossal Fighter in this deck, just because I don't know. I just think Colossal again that works under skill drain as well, and it's still 2800 beater, and it's a resilient monster for battle. So it's pretty difficult to get rid of in that sense because they can't kill it with like a Caius or something because you have skill drain unless they have like Book of Moon. So that's kind of like why I like this card. I don't know. I like Colossal Fighter, so I would play Colossal Fighter. And of course Trish. Trish is super easy to make. You could just go. It's literally just Striker, Warwolf, and then any of the 4s with Thunder King, Tengu, Rush Rhino, and then again all the TGs are searchable. So you go special the Striker, and then special the Warwolf, and then normal summon a level 4, and you have Trish. Leviathan Dragon for when you have the 2 Warwolves, and you can take level 3s. It's pretty common to if your opponent goes like Tour Guide Sangan, and they can't like battle phase over or anything like that. You could like TG1 EM1 if they leave their Sangan up. You can summon Warwolf and then like steal their Sangan with that card and then overlay with it so they don't get the search. So that's another way to deny your opponent the search, is like making Leviathan Dragon. Zenmane's was out at the time, but skill drain. And Asagolan was not. And then he played for Rank 4's 2 Utopias. Again, skill drain, but also he doesn't play Roach because, again, we're not dealing with a plant meta. We're dealing with a Dino Rabbit meta. So having 2 Utopias is more useful than having a Steel Swarm Roach. But if you're playing the older version of the format with the typical retroactive version, replace one of these for a Steel Swarm Roach because you're going to be dealing with plants. And you're typically not going to be making 2 Utopias. But it is nice to have like the option and things like that, of course. And then you have to play the wide variety of synchro levels because of the TG1 EM1, and you have your strikers, so you can steal your opponent's Librarian and things like that. So that's why we kind of have to like cover all of our bases. It's like having like Reborn and things like that. So for the side deck, again, this is plant format, but there was no plants in the top 32, at least that we could find. There were actually Dark Worlds. And then they did have access to Smog at this time. But again, this is your Dino Rabbit meta, and with the wind-ups. And of course, the Insectors. So this is kind of what we're siding against. We're just going to kind of go with that here. 2 copies of Cyber Dragon. Again, it's a good body going second. So we want to make sure that we can have that body to get on the board. He didn't play Chimera Tech. I would side deck Chimera Tech for the like large amount of Zenmanes and things like that, just because you can contact out Zenmanes because it's a machine. Against the burn matchup, you're siding out your skill drains. So he plays 3 copies of Des Wombat, This deck does not put enough pressure on the board at one time, because like they're not going to be running over your TGs, so you're not going to be searching with them to replace them. You're just going to have to hard draw monsters and try and win the game. So with this, you just put the Des Wombat on the board and just try and just like beat down or whatever. Because again, you want to be able to play around Lava Golem, but because like I said, this deck has a really hard time winning the game quickly, which is what Burn will do to you. So in order to stop that chamber matchup, we don't want to side deck Roll Decree, because that's really counterintuitive against us. And a lot of those decks will be siding in their MSTs to get rid of Decree anyway. So you just put a Des Wombat on the board, you don't put another monster, they can't Lava Golem you. It's kind of the equivalent of like leaving just Jinzo. 2 copies of Kycoo. This removes Hornet, because Dragonfly and Ladybug, or Dragonfly and Hornet or whatever, they're all small, Centipede small. This can beat over all of them, then it could do that damage to run it over, to remove them from the graveyard, and then just kind of hinder their play tier. 2 copies of MST. Again, we have to be able to pop Decree, so this is the side for the side kind of thing. And you just like got to get rid of the high impact cards and floodgates and things like that. 2 copies of Shadow Mirror, because this is completely free. Free wins against Dark Wolves. If they don't have a way to out it, they can't really play at all.
Can you still Warwolf with that card on the field?
It activates in hand.
I mean the search effect.
No, because it negates the effects in the graveyard, but you can still trigger the Warwolf in hand.
Alright.
The 3rd copy of EM1, really good against decks with like a boss monster. Like you can just, if they make a Dolka against you and you just take Dolka, that's kind of disgusting. Yeah. A copy of Mind Crush. This is probably like just like the 15th like flex spot, but it is good against, because Shark again has to reveal itself. So if they have to like reveal Shark to go for like the Magician Shark, whatever, you can just Mind Crush the Shark out of their hand. It's kind of good. It's kind of like Mind Crushing Megalo, but like before that. And then 2 safe zones just as like a generic like protection against decks that like have to win, like destroy things by battle. And you can just like kind of protect your monsters or whatever. It's a decent card. Like it's a versatile card. It's wide, is what we like to say. It's a wide card as opposed to narrow. So again, it's like side decking Compulse in a lot of decks. So let me know what you guys think of the deck. I'll be sure to do my own version of this at some point where we're looking not at these cards in the format. We don't have to deal with Dark Smog or Logia and Dolka, or the Inzectors blowing up your whole board, or Hunter taking your whole hand out. So, but this was legal completely to play everything. He picked even Leviathan Dragon over Zen Mains and things like that. So let me know what you guys think of the deck. Be sure to like and subscribe for more retro format content, and thanks for watching, guys.